Her hands guided mine underwater before I ever knew her name. I surfaced gasping, and she was already smiling at me. "You held your breath too long," she said. "Trust the water." I didn't know that trust would cost me everything I'd built. 3 weeks later, my mother stopped answering my calls. My fiancé showed up in Key West, uninvited, furious, and right. Jordan asked me to choose, right there on the dock. I still don't know how I found the courage to answer. My name is Sarah Mitchell, 31 years old, a schoolteacher from Charleston, South Carolina, raised on porch manners and Sunday sermons. I came to Key West alone that June, running from a wedding I'd already called off twice, though nobody outside my family knew why. The dive shop sat at the end of a cracked pier. Sign faded, its screen door slapping in the wind. Jordan Reyes leaned against the counter, sunburned and unbothered, sizing me up like she'd seen 100 women like me before. "First time diving?" she asked, and I nodded, gripping my rental fins like a life raft I didn't trust. She didn't laugh at my nerves. She just said, "Everyone's scared the first time. That's how you know it matters." We waded into the shallows together, and she showed me how to clear my mask without panicking. Her voice stayed low and steady, even when I choked on salt water and flailed like a startled bird. By the second lesson, I noticed I was memorizing her laugh instead of the hand signal she taught me. She caught me staring once and just raised an eyebrow, letting the silence stretch until I looked away, blushing. I told myself it was gratitude, nothing more. The kind you feel toward anyone who keeps you from drowning. But I started arriving early to the shop, inventing reasons to linger by the tanks and compressors. On the 5th day, she asked me to dinner, casual as anything, and I said yes before I could think. Dinner was grilled snapper and cheap wine on a dock, the ocean turning gold, and Jordan asking real questions instead of small talk. She wanted to know what I loved, not what I did for a living, and nobody had asked me that in years. I told her about teaching 3rd grade, about my mother's expectations, carefully skipping the parts that might give me away. Jordan listened without pushing, though I caught her eyes lingering on the tan line where a ring used to sit. "Broken engagement," she guessed, and I nodded, surprised by how easy it was to admit to a stranger. She didn't ask why. She just refilled my glass and said, "Good. You get to start over here." I dove again the next morning, and this time I forgot to count my breaths, forgot to be afraid. Underwater, Jordan pointed out a sea turtle, and I watched her face light up more than the turtle did. Back on the boat, she peeled off her wetsuit sleeves, and I made myself look at the horizon instead. That night I called my sister, Emily, and lied about how the trip was going, keeping my voice light. Emily asked when I was coming home for the rehearsal dinner planning, since Mom needed help with the seating chart. I said soon, though something in my chest already knew I wasn't ready to leave Key West yet. Jordan started teaching me the names of fish like she was handing me small gifts, one Latin word at a time. I learned she'd grown up 2 towns over, in a trailer park near the shipyards. Nothing like my house with the columns. "Water doesn't care where you're from," she told me once, coiling a rope. That's why I never left it. I asked why she became an instructor instead of something else, and her jaw tightened just slightly before she answered. "Someone taught me the ocean isn't the enemy," she said. I wanted to pass that along. She didn't elaborate. I let it go, though I filed the flicker of pain in her eyes away, wondering what she wasn't saying. We started diving every day, official lessons blurring into something else, something that had nothing to do with certification. One afternoon she took my hand underwater just to point out a stingray, and neither of us let go after. Back on land, she didn't mention it either, but the space between us had changed shape without a single word. I extended my hotel stay another week, telling myself it was for the dive certification. Nothing more complicated than that. My mother called that night. Her voice clipped. Daniel says you won't return his texts. What's going on? Sarah. I said I needed time. And she said time wasn't something a 31-year-old woman could afford to waste anymore. I hung up shaking and found myself walking to the dive shop instead of back to my hotel room. Jordan was closing up, tank valves hissing as she checked pressure gauges, and she looked up like she'd expected me. Bad call? She asked, and I nodded, and she handed me a beer without asking anything further. We sat on the dock until the stars came out, saying very little, saying everything that mattered without speaking it. You're allowed to want something different, Jordan said finally, staring at the water instead of at me. I didn't answer, but I let my shoulder rest against hers, and she didn't pull away. The next morning she taught me a night dive. Flashlight beams catching sleeping parrotfish tucked into coral crevices. Underwater. In the dark. She squeezed my hand twice, the signal for okay, and I squeezed back 3 times. 3 meant something else between us now. Something we hadn't named but both understood completely. On the boat ride back, she finally told me about her sister, Marisol, who drowned when Jordan was 19. I taught her to swim when she was 6, Jordan said. I wasn't there the day she needed me most. I reached for her hand, and this time it wasn't a dive signal, just 2 people holding on. I became an instructor so no one else would ever drown on my watch, she said quietly. Selfish. Maybe. I told her it wasn't selfish. It was love wearing a wetsuit, and she laughed for the first time that night. That laugh undid something in me I'd kept locked for years. Some door I hadn't let myself open. I kissed her before I decided to, salt still on both our lips. The boat rocking gently beneath us. She kissed me back like she'd been waiting. Careful at first, then not careful at all. We didn't talk about what it meant. We just sat there afterward, her head on my shoulder, the engine humming. I knew, sitting there, that I couldn't go back to Charleston and pretend this was a vacation fling. I also knew my family would never understand it. Not my mother. Not the church. Not the life mapped out for me. I pushed the thought down and let myself have one more night of not thinking about any of it. Jordan walked me to my hotel and stopped at the door, not presuming, waiting for me to decide. Stay, I said. And she did. And nothing happened that night except 2 people finally being honest. We talked until sunrise about her mother's disappointment, my father's silence, and how loneliness had shaped us both differently. Daniel showed up 4 days later, standing outside the dive shop in loafers that didn't belong anywhere near sand. You block my calls for a diving instructor? He said, loud enough that Jordan heard every word from the counter. I felt my whole carefully built week collapse into something small and exposed, right there in front of both of them. This isn't about her, I said, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true anymore. Daniel followed me outside, voice softer now, reminding me of the wedding invitations already printed, the deposit already paid. Your mother thinks you're having a breakdown, he said. I told her I'd bring you home. I told him I wasn't broken. I was finally seeing clearly, and he laughed like I'd said something absurd. Clearly, he repeated. You've known this woman 2 weeks. He wasn't entirely wrong, and that scared me. Jordan didn't come outside during the argument, and when I went back in, her face had closed like a door. You don't owe me an explanation, she said, coiling a hose too tightly, not looking at me. I'm not choosing him, I said, and she said, I didn't ask you to choose anything, which stung more than anger would have. That night I sat alone on the beach, phone buzzing with calls from Daniel, then my mother, then Emily. I finally answered Emily, who said Mom had been crying since Daniel called her, saying I'd gone off the deep end. Sarah, just come home and talk to her, Emily said. You don't have to decide anything right now. I promised to think about it, though thinking about it felt like standing at the edge of 2 different lives. I avoided the dive shop for 2 days, telling myself I needed space, though really I was afraid of Jordan's face. On the third day, she found me at a cafe, sliding into the seat across from me without asking. "I'm not mad you have a life to untangle," she said. "I'm mad you're untangling it without telling me anything." She was right, and I hated that she was right, and I hated more how good it felt to be seen. I told her everything then, the broken engagements, my mother's ultimatums, the small southern town that watched everyone's every move. "They already suspect," I admitted. "My mother asked me once, years ago, if I preferred the company of women." "What did you say?" Jordan asked, and I told her I'd laughed it off, terrified, and never spoken of it again. Jordan went quiet, turning her coffee cup slowly. "I can't be someone's secret forever, Sarah. I did that once already." She told me about an ex in Miami, a woman who kept her hidden from a strict Catholic family for 3 years. "It broke something in me," Jordan said. "I promised myself I wouldn't be anyone's shame again. I understood. And it terrified me, because I didn't know yet if I could be brave enough for both of us." Daniel called again that evening, and this time I answered, if only to finally end things properly. "I'm not coming back," I told him. "Not to the wedding. Not to any version of what we planned." He was quiet for a long moment, then said, "Is it her?" And I didn't lie this time. "Yes," I said, my voice shaking. "It's her. But it's also just me. Finally being honest for once." He hung up without another word, and I sat there shaking, relieved and terrified in equal, dizzying measure. I called my mother next, my hands cold despite the Florida heat pressing through the hotel window. "I need to tell you something," I said, and she said, "Don't," so sharply that I froze completely. "Whatever it is, Sarah, think very carefully before you say it out loud," she warned, her voice like ice. I hung up without saying it, ashamed of my own cowardice, and cried harder than I had in years. Jordan found me on the dock afterward, and I told her what happened, bracing for disappointment I felt I deserved. Instead, she just sat beside me, silent, letting the waves fill the space where words weren't coming. "You don't have to be ready today," she said. "Just don't disappear on me while you figure it out." Promised I wouldn't, though a part of me already worried that promise might be harder to keep than I thought. The dive shop owner, an older man named Hank, noticed the tension and pulled Jordan aside one morning. "Careful with the tourists," he warned her. "You know how this town talks when word gets back to families." Jordan brushed it off in front of me, but I saw the flicker of old fear cross her face. That night she admitted Hank had fired an instructor once, years back, over rumors about who she loved. "Small towns aren't just where you're from," Jordan said bitterly. "They're everywhere. If you're the wrong kind of visible." I realized then how much she'd already risked just by being seen with me, day after day, in public. Guilt sat heavy in my stomach, knowing I still had a home to return to, and she had nowhere safer to go. "Maybe I shouldn't have let this happen," I said quietly, and immediately regretted it as her face fell. "Don't do that," Jordan said. "Don't make yourself the martyr and me the mistake." "I'm not sorry." "Are you?" I wasn't sorry, and I told her so, but sorry wasn't really the problem I was wrestling with anymore. 2 days later, my father called. The first time he'd phoned me directly in almost a year. "Your mother's beside herself," he said. "Come home, Sarah. We'll figure this out as a family, together." Something in his voice sounded different than I expected. Tired, not angry, almost gentle in a way that confused me. I flew back to Charleston that weekend, promising Jordan I'd return, though neither of us said for certain when. The house looked exactly the same: white columns, boxwood hedges, my mother's roses blooming like nothing had changed. My mother hugged me stiffly at the door, then immediately started talking about salvaging things with Daniel's family. People will forget the broken engagement, she said. But this other thing. Sarah. This cannot get out. I sat at the kitchen table, 17 years old again in every way that mattered. Shrinking under her gaze, Emily found me later, in my old bedroom, and asked carefully, "Is it true?" About the diving instructor. I nodded and braced myself, but Emily just sat on the bed beside me, quiet for a long moment. "I always wondered," she said finally, "the way you talked about Claire in college. I just never asked." Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by fear that Emily might not keep this to herself. She promised she would. And for 2 days, she did. Until our cousin found photos on Emily's unlocked phone. The photos were harmless, me and Jordan on a boat, laughing, but the cousin showed my mother anyway. My mother confronted me that night, holding her phone like evidence, her hands trembling with something between rage and grief. "How long has this been happening?" she demanded. "Is this why you called off the wedding? All those years ago too?" I finally said it out loud. In my mother's kitchen. "I'm gay, Mom. I have been for a long time." The silence afterward stretched so long I thought the house itself had stopped breathing along with us. "I need you to leave," she finally said. Not cruelly, just brokenly. Like the words cost her everything she had. I packed a bag that night, Emily crying in the doorway, our father standing silent at the end of the hall. As I reached the front door, my father spoke. "Wait," he said. "Sit with me a minute, please." We sat on the porch steps, and he told me something I never expected to hear from him. "I've known since you were 16, he said. "The way you looked at your friend Claire at graduation." I stared at him. Done. As he explained, he'd simply been waiting for me to trust him with it. "I stayed quiet because your mother needed time," he said. "Maybe too much time. I'm sorry for that. It wasn't full acceptance. Not yet. But it was more than I'd hoped for in my darkest imaginings." I called Jordan from the airport, voice raw, and told her everything that had happened in Charleston. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "I'm proud of you," and I finally let myself cry without shame. But when I landed back in Key West, something in Jordan seemed different, distracted, like she was holding something back. I found out why 2 days later. A marine research station in Queensland, Australia, had offered her a position. "It's a 2-year contract," she said. "Reef restoration work. It's everything I've wanted since I was 22. My stomach dropped, though I told her, honestly, that she should take it, that I wouldn't hold her back. "I haven't accepted yet," she said. "I wanted to talk to you first, before I made any decisions." We argued that night. Not cruelly, but painfully. Both of us circling the same impossible question without an answer. "I just found the courage to be honest," I said. "And now you might leave for 2 years? I can't put my whole life on hold for something 3 weeks old," Jordan said, and immediately looked like she regretted it. I left the shop that night without saying goodbye properly, angrier at the timing than at her, though it felt the same. I stayed in my hotel room for 2 days, replaying every conversation, wondering if this whole trip had been a mistake. Hank, of all people, showed up at my hotel door, awkwardly holding a 6-pack of soda instead of beer. "She hasn't accepted the job," he said. "She's been staring at that email for 3 days straight. Same as you." I asked why he was telling me this, and he shrugged. "Because someone should. She's stubborn. So are you." I walked to the dive shop that evening and found Jordan sitting alone on the dock, phone in her hand. "I'm not asking you to choose me over your dream," I said. "I'm asking you not to run from us out of fear." "That's not fair," she said. "You get to go home eventually. I don't get a home that wants me back." The words landed hard, and I realized I'd been so focused on my own coming out I'd forgotten hers cost more. Then let me be your home, I said, surprising us both with how certain the words sounded coming out. She looked at me for a long moment, eyes wet, and said, "That's a big thing to promise a diving instructor." "I mean it," I said. "I'll get a teaching job here. Or in Australia. Or wherever you need to be." She laughed through tears. "You'd really leave Charleston? Your whole life? Your family? Your school?" "My family already knows," I said. "The only thing left to lose is a version of me that was never real anyway." Emily called the next morning with unexpected news. Our mother had asked to see the photos of Jordan again. Alone. "She didn't say much," Emily reported. "But she asked if this Jordan person made you happy. That's something. Right?" I didn't know what to make of it, so I focused instead on the decision waiting in front of me. Jordan decided to defer the Australia position for 1 year, choosing to stay and see where we could go together. 1 year, she said. "Not because I'm scared, but because I want to build something first before I run toward reefs." Emily's wedding was set for that October, and she asked if I'd bring Jordan, officially, as my partner. "Mom might not come if you do," Emily warned gently, and I told her I understood, and asked her to invite us anyway. The week before the wedding, my mother called, her voice unsteady in a way I'd never heard before. "I've been going to a support group," she said, "for parents." I didn't know those existed until Emily found one. I sat in stunned silence as she admitted, haltingly, that losing me over this felt worse than any embarrassment ever could. "I'm not going to pretend I understand everything," she said. "But I don't want an empty chair at your sister's wedding," she asked, quietly. "If Jordan would be there." And I said yes. And she said, simply, "Then I'll be there too." I hung up shaking, unsure if this was healing or just the beginning of a much longer, harder conversation. On the wedding day, Jordan wore a pale blue dress and stood beside me like she belonged there completely. My mother arrived late, sitting stiffly in the back pew, eyes fixed forward, hands folded tight in her lap. At the reception, she approached us slowly, and for a long moment, no one at the table said anything at all. "Jordan," my mother finally said, "Sarah tells me you teach diving. I've never understood the appeal of deep water." "It's not about the depth," Jordan said carefully. "It's about trusting what's holding you up down there." My mother studied her for a long moment, then nodded once, like something private had been quietly settled between them. It wasn't forgiveness exactly. Not yet. But it was a door left open instead of slammed shut completely. My father pulled me aside later and said, "Give her time." She showed up. That's more than I expected. Daniel was there too, seated with his new fiancée, and he caught my eye and offered a small, genuine nod. "You look happy," he said, finding me by the bar. "I'm glad. I mean that. Even if it took me a while." I thanked him, surprised by how much peace I felt, finally free of a life we'd both been performing. Jordan and I danced once, carefully, not too close, respecting a family still learning how to watch us exist. "This is more than I thought I'd get," Jordan whispered. "A wedding. Your mother speaking to me. Your father's blessing." "This is just the beginning," I said. "We still have Australia to figure out. A whole life to build." She smiled against my shoulder. "Reef restoration takes patience. So does this." I think we're good at both. 6 months later, I accepted a teaching position at an international school in Cairns, near her research station. My mother cried at the airport, not from grief this time, but from something closer to reluctant, aching pride. "Call me every Sunday," she said, hugging me tightly. "And send pictures. I want to see this ocean of yours." Promised I would. And for the first time in years, I believed my own promise completely. Jordan was waiting at the gate in Cairns, sunburned and grinning, exactly like the day we first met. I taught third grade by day and learned to trust the deep water all over again by her side every evening. Some people spend their whole lives afraid of what's beneath the surface. I finally learned it was where I belonged. Vandy.